And you know, if I run my business like the federal government runs it, I'd be out of business. Matter of fact, it's almost impossible to stay in business. As hard as I've worked and many hours I've put in and many good things that I've invented, it's very difficult to stay in business. And my son Todd, one time, a couple of years or so ago, says, Dad, I hope you take this as a compliment. I wouldn't be you for nothing in the world. Because he knows, I don't know what we're going to invent next or fix next, and how we're going to build it, and then we're going to make something. We're going to try to figure out how to market nationally and internationally. And we're going to get patents all over the country and all over, maybe in other countries in the world. And shoot, I have no idea what tomorrow's like. And our federal government is destroying this country because they will not manage themselves. And the more things you put the government in charge of managing, the worse it's going to be. They're not about finding a place to use their law because they're not going to look for it. Okay? They're not going to, when I get there, they're going to look for it still. So what you've got to do is use your power and authority to get rid of all the things that the government's trying to manage. And the better you do that, the better you put in the hands of free enterprise, the better you'll be. I guarantee you, Steve had a customer come in and they buried him in the wrong grave or don't bury him at all. He kind of catch a little flack sooner or later. You know, my business is the same way. If I run out line the wrong sewer lines or whatever all the stuff we do, man, they may not like it when I bill them for something that they didn't order. You know? So we have to do our business right. And we have to do it right every time. You know, you mess up 10% of the time, you lost all your profit. But in them, it doesn't matter because they're just going to print you some more money. So you've got to get the government out of everything. Everything you can eliminate, them being a part of it, you got to do it, and you got to do it now. You don't have 10 more years to mess around and say, you got to stop the federal government right now and do it better. Thank you.
I think the very first thing that I would have to do, and as a freshman, let me say this, you have a lot of people that tell you what you're going to do. When you're a freshman, you have to do a lot of listening. But I will tell you this, the very first thing you want to do is get there with the people that have just been elected, and you have to form a coalition. Because as a group, you have power. And so therefore, we have to make sure that those of us who are newly elected to Congress, that we understand, because we just came from the heartland, that we are there to represent the people, not a party. We're there to represent what is right, not a party. I know, and this is where my business experience comes in. You know, it's always fun to hire people, but I have to tell you, I know what it's like to not be able to eat lunch because to know that afternoon, I was having to bring people in and I was having to let them go. I was having to let them go because we just couldn't afford to keep them. Now, I got to tell you something. You don't just delegate that. Great leaders step to the plate when it's difficult. And unfortunately, there's a lot of federal employees that need to be let go because we can't afford them. So the very first thing we have to do to tackle this $14 trillion debt, we have to rely upon business experience, which is what I bring to the table. And we have to put a cap on spending. We have to say that we are not going to allow our spending ever to increase over 20% of GDP. That has worked for us for 70 years until the Obama administration. The Obama administration has now pushed our spending up to 24%, and it's on pace to hit 26%. That is unsustainable. 18 to 20% has worked since World War II. 70 years, recessions, wars, conflicts, uncertainty, it has worked. We've got to get back to that. Secondly, we've got to make sure that we restore states' rights. There is much that the federal government is doing that they have no constitutional right to do. And when Washington does it, again, it's going to be incompetent. We have seen that through two different administrations, Katrina and now the oil spill. So it really doesn't matter whether it's Republican or whether it's Democrat. The federal government is broke. It is broke bad. And so therefore we need to allow the states and the local communities to do what the federal government has taken away from us. And you have to understand that in order to make sure that happens. I believe the coalition that I will join will understand that because we're not elected politicians in life. We are people of the people. Thirdly, I believe in freezing hiring. Those situations where you don't want to let as many people go, you freeze hiring. And I believe if you freeze hiring for 4 years through attrition, through people retiring, people quitting, and people moving, that you will see a shrinking of the federal government. Freeze hiring. And then finally, I believe we've got to get a hold of the budget money we spend to foreign countries who are our enemies and could care less about your children, my children, or anything that we care about. The money we give to these countries in the United Nations that vote against us 90% of the time, I will be very fervent to make sure that that is addressed as long as I represent you in Congress. Thank you. Your question was that you talked about the importance of the U.S. Constitution, and you talked about an unconstitutional rider or amendment attached to a bill that I sponsored. Would I still vote for that? I will tell you this: there is no justification for voting for any legislation that violates the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and I believe that we as Americans, if we want to change the Constitution, then we must do so. I think to ignore the Constitution and violate it, like the federal government has done regarding immigration, it's almost like they ignore it. As a matter of fact, they're willing to sue the state of Arizona just so they can continue to ignore it. I find that hard to believe. I believe that just like they continue to trample on the 10th Amendment and take away from the states their rights to care for the people of that state. You see, I believe that you and I are citizens of two places. We're citizens of the United States of America. We're also citizens of the state of Florida. And the state of Florida has a responsibility, not just a right, but a responsibility to protect its citizens of Florida. Just like the federal government has a constitutional responsibility to protect the rights of the people of the United States. So no, that's why I believe in a line item veto. I believe that things like line item vetoes and balanced budgets are important, because what that does is that kind of drills down and peels off things that are bad, and yet still being able to pass pieces of legislation that are good. Now, I will say this: anytime I mention balanced budget, and I know that's part of your question, I believe vehemently that you can't have a balanced budget amendment without the caveat that you can't raise taxes in order to balance it. As long as you can raise taxes to balance the budget, then anybody else watching, yeah, balanced budget. But no, we cannot pass anything. We have got to start getting back to our roots, and the Constitution is the rule of law, and it must be acknowledged as such. Thank you.
Well, if you got one of my rat cards and you look on the back, I promise you, and I sign it, it's a contract for you. I will never vote on any bill without asking the following questions. Is it right and moral? Is it constitutional? Is it necessary? Is it affordable? And how do the people in my district want me to vote? So, absolutely not. If it was unconstitutional, I would not. Restoring the Constitution, we will probably have to get rid of a lot of case law, because I argue with my daughter's fiance all the time. He's an attorney, and he thinks that case law takes precedence over the original interpretation. So we're going to have people up there that begin talking about this. I don't want them to go in and start doing amendments. I think that would just be disastrous to have them go in and start meddling with our Constitution. I mean, the state of Florida is a prime example of that. Every time somebody wants something, we have another amendment to our Constitution. And right now, our Constitution looks like a joke here in the state of Florida. So I would definitely want to try to get people back to the original interpretation and start bringing that out, so that people out in these different districts and in these different states would start speaking up and talking to their representatives and their senators about, wait a minute, this was the original interpretation, this is what we should be doing, and you need to get back to the Constitution. And again, I think it's just going to be the people up there, whether it's one of us, two of us, five of us, that start doing the right thing and start abiding by the Constitution and ensuring that more people are educated not only on what they think is written in the Constitution, but what these original